4624, Healing from Here.
4624, Healing from Here. I'm so happy to be here again. Good morning. Well, it could be morning, afternoon, or whatever, anywhere. So I'll just say hello, brother. Good to see you today. How you
Good to
doing?
see you too. I'm good, man. I can't complain. It seems like the weather's changing up in October, so that's always a good thing.
Yeah, for sure.
How you doing?
I'm doing real good. I'm happy to be here. It's always good to talk to you, of course. And we're not alone today. We have Todd Schultz joining us, who is a very well respected name in the psychobiography field, just in psychology in general. But he has a specialty in the psychobiography realm of things, compiled a book on that and written several papers. And I ran across one of his articles that was not a part of his psychobiography work, but touched me deeply when he was sharing about family experiences and just being so raw and so vulnerable about that. And all I could think is, how's he doing after all that? I need to contact him. And how was he able to share his story like that? Because I get so stuck, and a lot of people do, in things that maybe that come from our childhood that are difficult to talk about or to process. You don't get stuck, brother.
Actually, I do. I told somebody that it takes, every time I tell a story, it feels like it takes a piece of me.
Mm.
It drains me. So it takes a couple of days for me to get back. It's a lot. But welcome to the show, Todd. We really appreciate you being on.
Nice to be here. Yeah, I was thinking about that. I think you're talking about that piece I wrote about my dad and
Yes.
my childhood and stuff. And that's the first thing that I've ever done that was about myself. You know, all my other writing has focused on other people.
Yeah.
which is a lot less vulnerable. Although there's a lot of me also when I'm in writing that I do, where I'm trying to understand other people.
Yeah.
But a lot of people had that reaction that they thought it was, when they read that article, that they thought it was inspiring that I had been so direct about it and revealed so much and been so vulnerable. And that actually surprised me, because I just felt like I was telling the story, and this is like going a little bit in a different direction, but I was just really focused on making this story work as a writer, you know, and it didn't really register with me that it was really being honest and vulnerable. But as I think about it more, it definitely was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the topic was narcissism. And you, in one of our previous conversations, you kind of told me that the editor was more so like, we need to, as in many stories written by journalists or writers, like, we need a human element of this thing. Like, how can we make this land, right?
I wrote that article probably about 4 times from scratch. Like, I have 4 different versions of that article. And the first time I wrote it, the whole idea was to just sort of tell the conceptual story, like in a very intellectualized way, tell the conceptual story of narcissism and what it was, because a lot of people use the term, but it's very poorly understood. It has a lot of nuances, narcissism. It's not, there's a lot of different forms of narcissistic expression and stuff. And it's not just the Trump version where there's incredible arrogance and constant need for adoration and fishing compliments and saying you're a genius and stuff. There's a lot of different forms, but that just ended up being sort of, it didn't have a lot of juice to it because it was just concept, you know? And so in a previous version of it, one of the early versions, I had briefly thrown my dad in as like an example, and my editor really helped shape that piece monumental ways. But she was like, maybe you should just build this whole thing around your dad, which was like, which had not occurred to me, you know?
Right.
But once I started doing it, it really flowed, and I knew that it was going to work that way.
Let me ask you a question, if you don't mind me asking. Is your father still alive?
No, he's not alive.
Okay. Would it have been harder for you to tell your story if he was alive? Because a lot of times people, I know, kind of deal with telling their story because they may have people that are still alive and it doesn't really paint them in the best of light.
Yeah, I probably would have had a bit more ambivalence if he was still alive, for sure. But I don't know what I would have done. That's a good question. I'm really not sure what I would have done had he been alive. I don't know. I've written a book about Truman Capote, the writer, and he said something that all writers kind of agree with, which is that as a writer, your material is just your own experience. My material is my family, my life, and I feel like I'm entitled to my truth just as much as other people are entitled to their truth. So I might have done it anyway. I don't know. That sounds kind of brutal and mean, but I might have done it anyway. But really, I don't know if you've read it, Ed. And I don't know. I feel like it was ultimately kind of a sympathetic portrait of him. I was just trying to understand him and the pain that he was in. I was not seeing him. It was not like you have a disease called narcissism. I was trying to get into the intricacies of it and how his lifelong feeling of inferiority, which one day he just sort of randomly confessed to me, which was incredibly out of character for him because he would never, ever be vulnerable, one day he confessed that to me. And it was the bane of his existence, and it made him do all these things that brought him a bunch of pain, but he wasn't strong enough to work his way out of that. So it was more about, ultimately, I feel like it was more about having some sympathy for him having had to live a failed life, trying to understand him from the inside and see how it must have been pretty devastating a lot of the time.
I have a question about that because we're saying the cost of telling the truth, and it does have these effects on you. Like, I wonder how you felt after writing the piece, but then it seems like it begins to open up the person that has caused the harm, open them up a little bit more to you beyond what's obvious. You told the truth of your dad, but then you were seeing. Did you feel like?
I told my truth. On the subject of truth, I just don't think there is any truth. I think we're always sort of like working out an approximation of what the truth is. And we're so bad, really, at understanding ourselves. People in general, there's a lot of psychological research just on how we are really terrible at making sense of the things that we do, So we're all kind of partially blinded when we're thinking about what's really going on. I'm sure you both feel that too. Every day I have a different feeling about what's going on. What am I doing? Do I want this or do I not want this? There's always, I feel like life is beset with a lot of ambivalence, and we're constantly questioning what's going on, or we're just kind of finding our way in the dark. All we can do is present our truth and just feel like we're open to it changing, and other people have different truths, and we just have to kind of sit with the different truths. Going back to Ed's question, I also talked about my sister in that piece, my sister hijacked an airplane back in the 70s. It was a big deal in my family. I was really small. And that had come up before in an interview that someone did with me, and I had mentioned that, and she was very mad, and she was telling me she really didn't want me to talk about that. And this relates again to what Ed was asking. But in that case, I felt like, well, I experienced it too. I was like the collateral damage. And I can tell my own story about what that hijacking experience did to me and to my family and how it changed everything. And I have a right to talk about it anytime I want to. I'm not going to be, silenced about it. So, that's another example of just feeling like there are things we feel like we need to say, and if we do it with dignity and we do it respectfully, it's just let the chips fall where they may kind of thing.
Well, great job to you for writing and telling your story, because I know it's difficult to do. Like you said, you may have family members that may look like, why are they telling that? What's going on? This is our family, and you need to carry this to the grave type thing.
I don't know about your family, but my family in particular, it was really forcefully conveyed to all of us that the strategy was to lie. And that's another thing. The strategy was to pretend that everything was fantastic, that our family was full of geniuses, everybody was flawless. That stemmed in part from my dad's really brittle desperate narcissism and needing to see himself in a particular way. And we were all sort of enlisted in this program of protecting the family myth. I don't know if that resonates with you.
Yeah, it does.
Absolutely.
So, like, that's nothing that I really started to feel like I needed to, even as a kid, I started to feel like this is just not true. I can't keep pretending, like I don't want to support the delusion of the family. Every family has their delusions that they tell themselves and they reciprocally reinforce to one another. But I just got to a point where I just wanted to be liberated by truth, I just didn't want to go along with that anymore. And when you don't go along with it anymore, and the whole family system is sort of organized around delusion, and you reject the delusion, you become the target, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's almost like people who are in a cult and they leave the cult, and then the cult sort of goes after that person, trying to destroy them.
Right.
That's kind of what happens, I feel like.
I know you're a psychologist by trade. What is the effect of just staying in that delusion then? People who are like, it's too high a price. Yes, this happened, but it's happened to a lot of people. So you just have to move on. What are your thoughts about?
It's a slow motion suicide, I think, existentially. I mean, you just know you're living a lie. It just can't feel good.
Yeah.
I do think it's the easy path. A lot of people do it because they want to get along, or they don't want to make waves, or they're not sure what it would mean if they told the truth and what the consequences would be. I mean, truth and consequences.
Yeah, right.
I think a lot of people are afraid to change things and reshuffle the deck by telling the truth because they're not sure what the end result is going to be. So you just get into an inertia where you're just like, you just keep accepting the status quo, and it comes at great cost. But it seems in a weird way, maybe for a lot of people, less scary than rejecting it and moving on to something new that you don't know what it's going to be like.
Right.
And you have to be okay with knowing that if you have some family members that fall out with you as a result, that's just that's the cost of you having peace, because you still have to see them at family gatherings, all of these things, but you may not be invited to as many as a result of
At
that.
least
But
initially.
like you said, you're freeing yourself up. It's almost like, I feel as though when it happened with us, it's almost like you're holding your soul hostage.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's like you made a pact with your family that you didn't know you were making inside.
That's exactly right. Yeah. But when you first make the pact, also, you're so little, you don't even know that you're making a pact, like you're saying. I mean, you just you don't have any ability to judge. Like at first you buy the myth completely because you don't have any independent way of making sense of it until you get a little older.
Right.
So you've already, by the time you're getting enough insight to reject the myth, you've already sort of devoted yourself for a while to the myth. And so that's another part of it. You have to overcome that early training,
And you talked about that too in something before, talking about how we internalize the relationship dynamics from the primary caregiver. What they've installed becomes a model in our mind. Me and my brother talk about this a lot. It becomes our default. How we act, how things are done, how we perceive life to be. It just kind of becomes our default until we decide no more.
Well, yeah, I don't want to turn this into a lecture, but that's the basic idea behind what's called attachment theory, where we immediately start figuring out what works to make us feel safe with our primary caregivers. And sometimes what works is us enabling everything that they do. Maybe that's what works, because then they don't hit us, or then they're not crushing us or whatever. And so those things that we do to feel safe as a little kid, every strategy that we use to feel safe, we internalize. Like if it works, and it may not really work really in the long run, but it works to make us feel safe at great cost to us, then we just keep repeating it. And the relationship strategies that we begin to utilize, they just keep evolving. They become more fine-tuned. And then we internalize them almost like a computer program. And it's like, okay, this is what I do in relationships, because the first relationships are the kind of, they set the foundation, like with our mom and dad or whatever. So based on those, whenever something comes up in a relationship, like you're worried someone's maybe not loving you as much as they used to, or the person's not returning your text messages or whatever.
Right.
Like once something comes up, we just fall back on those strategies. They just become an internal, it's called an internal working model. And they just get activated, and we just keep doing the same things over and over again. And some of the things that we do are dysfunctional. Like some people are securely attached. If you have parents who are like available and responsive when you're in distress, and they're good at soothing you and comforting you, that's fantastic. It has a million positive mental health outcomes. But a lot of people are, but that only goes for like 52% of the population, according to the research, are securely attached.
Wow.
So you got like another 48% of the population who are what are called insecurely attached, and they're either anxiously insecure or they're avoidant. If you're anxious, you're like always on red alert about relationships, and you're always fearing abandonment, and you're always making desperate efforts to get people to love you. If you're avoidant, you're just like, whenever I tried to be close, I was hurt. So I'm just going to not have anything to do with people.
I do have another question about narcissism.
Sure.
Is it possible in a family dynamic, like narcissism, just to label somebody that is like a trend? It's real trendy now.
Very.
Back in the day when I was a child or younger, I didn't even really know the word. I just knew selfishness. That's what I knew. Being selfish.
I actually talk about that same thing in the article. Nobody ever used the word when I was a kid.
Nobody.
Yeah. But is it possible for you to still have a loving, let me back up. How can you still have a loving relationship with a family member that is narcissistic?
That's a good question.
How do you keep that intact without
That's a great question.
Because we're taught, if you're a narcissist now, society is saying if you're a narcissist, throw them away, they're bad, no contact, keep it pushing. I don't necessarily agree with that, because we're all wired differently. What are your thoughts?
Also, it's a spectrum. I'm completely opposed to labels. So I would never call someone a narcissist. I know we've been using that term today or whatever, but I'm completely opposed to labels. So when I think of a narcissist, I think of someone with a particular motivational agenda, right? So I think of it in terms of needs, not some disease that's in their head or whatever. So what are they needing and why? The motivational agenda for some narcissists is to, with incredible thirst, seek constant adoration, because internally they are so fragile and incapable of functioning unless people constantly adore them and shore them up, that's what I was talking about in that article in relation to my dad. That kind of describes my dad. So I don't think of it as a label. I agree with you. It's completely overused. I think a lot of it got into the wind a lot, I think, because of Trump, because he's a flaming extreme narcissist in like a clinical sense. There's no doubt about that. I've never seen, he's like the platonic form of a narcissist, but a particular kind. But I don't really, it's not, if you call, let's say, Trump a narcissist, you don't really gain anything. It's better to think about like why they're using these particular strategies and how that developed, and what they're getting out of it or whatever. But going back to your question, exactly, I feel like it's such a tough question. I never know what to say about it. And like I said, it always comes up in my classes. But in one sense, it would be fair to say that a lot of people we call narcissists, they're not capable of love. They're not capable of, because they don't see you as anything but a source of adoration. So they're not going to, you may love them, but they're not going to love you in the way that you love them, because they see your job is to make them feel amazing, So can you love them? I mean, yeah, you can. I mean, you can sympathize with them. You could feel sorry for them. I think that is kind of a good way to go if you like have the strength to do that. But you also have to be aware that they're not going to give you the supplies back. I mean, in a lot of cases, they're not going to be capable of doing that in a genuine, sincere way because they just don't
have it in them.
That's not what their agenda is.
Right.
They don't really want intimacy or love. What they want is power, and I keep using this word, but like adoration from other people. They'd rather, according to the research, intimacy is not important to people we call narcissists. They don't really want intimacy. It's way more transactional what they're doing.
Right.
Plus, they're not capable of the vulnerability that would be required for true intimacy. Like, intimacy is all about being open and sharing parts of yourself that make you scared, and so you're not going to have real intimacy with people that we tend to call narcissists, I don't think. Yeah, also, Ed, like one other thing you were talking about, and I feel this very personally, and there is, I have some friends who are clinicians, and this comes up a lot in their practice, but like at a certain point, I think it is justified to just remove them from your life totally, not even going to the family functions anymore, even if you're invited, like end it. I mean, they've caused so much pain to you. Why do you feel like you need to continue the relationship? At some point, it's totally fair and valid, I think, to just discontinue the relationship. And that's honestly, that's what I have done. Maybe that's not something you all are thinking of doing, but that's something that I have done with family. I don't have anything to do with them anymore. I don't have anything to do with them. All they do is cause me a lot of emotional pain in lots of different ways. And finally I said, I'm not going to participate anymore in this dynamic.
Right.
We also hear about boundaries, and a lot of times, which I'll pivot into this next because I'm looking at the time and being respectful too. What does healing from here look like? And for me, healing from here, I do think boundaries are important. I just have to determine along the way. I don't think it's an all none for me. Even though I may have established a boundary from you right now, I don't know that it'll be forever if changes are made or I prayed, things have come to me. You know what I mean? That's
Depends
kind of
on the
how I view
individual.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's an individual thing.
That's probably better than what I'm doing. I just personally, and this is my own weakness or something, but if someone betrays me, it just kind of is over for me. I don't know. But I like what you're saying. I should actually be more open to repair or something. But I wouldn't say I would have a lot of hope that the repair would be genuine. From what I've been through and what I know to be true, I just don't feel like there's a lot of prospect for repair. But I feel like what you're saying makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
To just stay open to maybe it can, for now you've got firm boundaries, you're taking a lot of distance. Maybe eventually something will change and you'll feel different, and then maybe you'll think it over again or whatever. I'm just not in a space where I would be willing to think it over again, but maybe I will be someday.
Yeah, so I think your surroundings, sometimes I was in foster care, so I aged out of the system. Sometimes our friends, and you may have a father figure or a mother figure that may foster into you to make up for what you weren't able to have from your original parents. So I think that helps a lot.
No, that's a totally important point. I didn't mean to imply that those primary relationships early on are set in stone and can't be changed. I think this is another reason why it's good to get the toxic people out of your life and find as many people who truly love you and care about you as you can, because as you build, like exactly like you're saying, Ed, like when you build like later new relationships, people who do love you, I've been noticing that more and more myself the last couple of years, is like when you have these really sincere, open, vulnerable relationships and you find out, wow, I can be safe being vulnerable. They won't leave me. They'll keep loving me. Then you start learning new strategies. Like it takes a while to change the old strategies. They're like habits, like any habit. It takes a while to change them. But the more that you can find people who really love you and really cultivate those relationships and sort of like jettison the toxic ones, the more you can slowly build different internal programs.
I love that. It just makes me think of if there were a visual like a glass full of water and then there's some dirt in it. And I've seen people do this example before, and then they just keep pouring more
Good
clean water,
example.
clean
That's
water,
exactly,
clean
that's
water.
exactly what I'm saying. That's exactly.
Yeah, that's what I saw.
Clearer and clearer and clearer and clearer. Yeah, right. Exactly. That's a
Yeah.
good.
So to your point, I think our consensus might be as a group right now, you do have to have those boundaries or you're just still dirt in the water. Saying, no, it's not dirt in the water, it's not dirt in the water. But the more you pour in the good, things begin to change. The default we learned early on begins to change. And then mindset changes and approaches change and our perspective changes. And so I strongly agree with that because I'm in a much stronger place because of what's being poured in. I
Absolutely.
could say that all day long and twice on Sunday. So
It's
that's how
one
I
thing
feel.
I like. It's one thing that I like about attachment theory compared to some other theories. I agree with both these things. One, your childhood is super important. You know,
Yes.
you do set patterns up then, and your experiences in childhood, they do mold you. There's no way around it. But
Mhm.
on the other hand, you can change the patterns. It's
Mhm.
not like you're at the mercy of all of this terrible stuff. The three of us are a great example. We're like great people, strong people. We think about all this stuff. We're trying to like move on. We're trying to make sense of our lives. We're trying to be loving and to the degree possible forgiving. We're not mired in like some kind of victim mentality where we don't have any agency or whatever. We do. And somehow we've all figured out how to start to change things bit by
Yeah.
bit. And
Right.
um, so it's like in attachment, childhood's important, but you can revise the story basically.
Wow.
And you need
Wow.
to do it. Sometimes you need to do it with a lot of fierceness and dedication, but you can do it.
And I think the name of the game is to not become what you despise.
Right.
So if it was narcissism, whatever that was, I try to do a better job of turning the camera on me. So I don't become that because now you're a hypocrite because you're complaining about all this stuff that happened,
Right.
but now you're becoming that. So it's one of those things to where you have to watch that. And I know it gets lonely a little bit when you start setting boundaries and cutting certain people off. You may look at your phone and see the number, be like, dang, I missed them. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it because you know
Mhm.
the cycle. So that's the drive for me is I want to make sure that I don't become the uncertainty that I had and I want to become what I despised.
Yeah, I love all of that, but I like what you say about you see your phone and you're like, that's the moment where
It's
you,
real.
yeah, some people feel like they don't have the control to resist or whatever. They can't resist. They have such a deep yearning or whatever for something that they find it very difficult not to answer that thing that they just saw on their phone, you know, and
Mhm.
before they know it, they're doing something that sometimes just feels false to them or whatever. Like,
Yep.
so that's where you have to kind of like really be strong, and it's not easy because like we
Mhm.
have these deep needs that we don't even understand. And so it's when you get that invitation to go down that road that part of you knows is maybe not the road you should go down, to resist it is sometimes really difficult.
And takes time. And takes time. A lot of us have stopped something bad that we didn't want to do anymore 100 times before we stopped it.
No,
And
it's
I
really
just say, give yourself grace in the healing process and see it as that. Is kind of how I look at it. See it as that. If you were in a hospital and you were trying to heal, there's boundaries. There's sometimes you can only have a set number of visitors. sometimes you can't have any visitors at all. It's just you and the doctors or whomever, you know what I mean? Or only the people to you who won't do harm.
Even from the outside, when you see people repeating patterns,
Yes.
and you love them and care about them, and you feel like, boy, are you sure you really want to do this? You know, it is like, I always want to give them grace, but sometimes it hurts you too when they're repeating the patterns.
Yeah.
And it's hard for you to give them grace even, because you're like, it's hurting me that you're doing this. So there's them doing it, but then it also can hurt other people in their lives that they're doing it. And
that's right.
But I think I love the word grace. I think that's what we should all strive towards.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And then to ourselves and giving it to
Yep.
others. But I know we're about to wrap. Was there something else you were going to say, brother?
No, I was just saying, in terms of me with certain individuals that I feel have wronged me or what have you, I want to always be able to live with my decision. You know what I mean? So whatever decision that I make, you got to stand on it and be able to live with it. You can change your decision too at any point in
Yep.
time. Everything is revisable, but to me, and everybody's temperament is different, I just want to be able to live with whatever decision I make. I say
Right.
I'm not going to fool with them or whatever. I want to stick to that as much as I can, but everybody has to leave one day. Everybody has to die. So when they die and they pass away, how are you going to feel? Are you going to feel like you had regrets that you didn't talk to them more? Or are you going to feel like, well, I'm glad that I set up those boundaries because it could have been me that passed away earlier as a result of all that stress and that harm that it caused me. So it's just one of those things.
Yeah, I think you have to feel like what you're doing is true. And so you have self-respect doing it. And if all of those things are in question, then I would really think hard about whether or not it's something that you want to do.
So the cost of the truth is really you. You're the cost of the truth. It's really not about anybody else. It really boils down to you.
Hard to even know what you feel sometimes. I mean, you're just trying to find your way, and like feelings are so ephemeral. They're changing every day. And one day you feel like maybe X is the right thing to do. The other day you feel like maybe Y is the right thing to do. It's just everything is just so confusing all the time in the world of relationships. That's why I was saying, I don't know, maybe before we started, we were talking, but I was just talking about how there is no truth or whatever. The truth is just shifting all the time.
And so we find our foundation in the one thing that doesn't change. And I don't want to go down the road, but sometimes the truth can change for us. But I try to find my stability in the things that don't shift.
I do think also going back to the title of what we were going to be talking
about. The cost of the truth, yeah.
I do think the truth hurts a lot of the time. And I do think that a lot of the time, I mean, this relates to some of the stuff we were talking about before. I think a lot of the time we would prefer to live in illusion than to face the truth. And that's another dynamic that you see a lot.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But we're on the other side of it, everybody. And we can tell you that it's not as bleak as you may think. It's more freeing, where you can have conversations like these about moving forward and no longer just being bound to things that may have been a bit delusional and just really not true. But walking in truth brings about a freedom and a healing journey that I would say personally is unmatched. But
absolutely,
that's all I'll say right now. For now, we're just so happy we had you on here, Todd.
Thank you so much, Todd.
Great conversation.
Oh my God. It was hard to say goodbye, but we'll just say see you later for now. And we really appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. It was really
being on the show. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
we appreciate it.
Nice to meet you both.
Nice to meet you as well.
Bye.
Bye.
This is my story. What's your story? Turn the camera on you and tell your story. He brought you to it, can bring you through it. He had his hands on my life, and God, won't he do it?